getting into NBA news because there's been a lot going on with the league with All-Star Weekend and the trade deadline approaching, so stay tuned. But before we get into all that, let me just ask you to go follow us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We posted our first 2 TikTok videos this past week, and there will be more content to come, so stay tuned for that. We're really excited to get to start putting out some content on that platform, and just go check out our merch pages, all that good stuff that comes with making a podcast. So that being said, let's get into the NBA, because the big news with the NBA from the last week was that the Warriors apparently tried to sign one LeBron James. They're not trying to sign, but they tried to trade for LeBron James. So the story that was reported by ESPN goes to the effect that Draymond Green, with context here, the Warriors are currently in 10th place in the Western Conference with a record of 27-26 and 11 games back from first place. So they're a far cry from the team that they were 2 years ago that won the championship. So with that in mind, Draymond Green seemingly realizes this and decided the Warriors needed a little bit of extra help, which he sought in the form of one LeBron James. So he called the Warriors owner Joe Lacob, and he asked to call Jeanie Buss and to check in and see if the Lakers would be open to trading LeBron. So that's exactly what the Warriors owner Joe Lacob did, and to the chagrin of Draymond Green and Warriors fans everywhere, and to the indifference of Lakers fans, I would imagine, LeBron said that he is not interested in being traded right now. So they called Jeanie, and instead of saying what she was thinking, she said, before we even have a conversation about trading LeBron, let me ask LeBron if he even wants to be traded. And LeBron said he did not. Now, LeBron does have a no-trade clause, so if Jeanie Buss really wanted to trade LeBron, she didn't have to get his approval. That was just a decent thing to do. So kudos to her for being decent and taking LeBron's feelings into account. But it is more than just decency. If this report had come out and instead of Jeanie Buss's first response being, let me tell LeBron before we even have this conversation, she was like, well, what are you offering me? And the Warriors gave an offer, and she didn't like it, and it fell through without even consulting LeBron, just for differences in negotiation. And this report came out. You would have a very unhappy LeBron James march into Jeanie Buss's office this week. So she played her cards right, and it looked like it worked out in the long run. Now, LeBron probably made the right move for not going to Golden State, just in terms of the GOAT conversation. I mean, he would have got crushed. You'd have had people say, you can't compare him to Jordan. He's just a bandwagoner. He's just jumping from franchise to franchise to franchise looking for rings. So I understand why LeBron would not want to leave the Lakers to go to Golden State, combined with the fact that Golden State is worse than the Lakers right now. So it really wouldn't do much in the way of getting him in the championship picture. However, if I were the Lakers, I would be more open to moving on from LeBron James than you would think, because his numbers aside, LeBron is putting up decent numbers for a 39-year-old. He doesn't have as big of an impact on winning as he used to. The Lakers are only one seed above the Warriors right now. They're 30-26, and they're 9.5 games back. LeBron is currently averaging 24.8 points on 52% from the field with 7 rebounds and 7 assists. I mean, that's solid, but He's not the player he used to be. He could potentially be a free agent this offseason. And it doesn't look like he's going to get you a championship anytime soon. So it might make sense to just call the LeBron James era a wrap and move on to the Anthony Davis era. If that's even something you would want to do, you might just blow the whole thing up. Now, another hidden wrinkle here is that Rich Paul is LeBron James' agent and childhood best friend. He is also the agent of Draymond Green, and he is also the agent of Anthony Davis. So if the Lakers somehow did anger LeBron James by trying to trade him, they might face that repercussion with Anthony Davis trying to leave the team and go somewhere else just because Rich Paul's clientele has a close bond. But LeBron has, for many years now, said that he wants to play with his son Bronny before he retires. Now, Bronny James is currently a freshman in college and will be NBA eligible this offseason, which is exactly why LeBron structured his NBA contract to have a player option this year. Because if LeBron decides that, or if Bronny decides that he wants to try his luck out in the NBA draft this offseason, LeBron cannot choose his player option and become a free agent now. If Bronny decides he wants to try another year in college, then LeBron can use his player option and be a free agent next offseason. Now, given the state of Bronny's statistics right now and his team, he might be a 4-year college player. He's currently averaging 5 points a game on a very poor USC team. Now, given Bronny's cardiac arrest and his health history, it's a miracle that he's even playing basketball right now, much less D1, like top tier. So kudos to him for even doing it. But he's not NBA ready right now. And I really hope that he doesn't feel pressured to wrap up his college career early just to fulfill this fantasy that LeBron has had for years, that he wants to play with his son before he retires. Because, I mean, the way Bronny's stats are looking, he's not NBA ready now. He may never be, and that's okay. I mean, athletics, either you got the gene or you don't. And Bronny is certainly an athletic person, like, don't get me wrong, but he just might not have the level of skill that his dad had, and that's perfectly fine. Most people, when your dad is LeBron James, wouldn't be able to follow up to that expectation. It's just that LeBron has made such a... LeBron's been talking about his son playing in the NBA since his son was 12. And so that just makes, one, the media more aware of who his son is, and makes them put pressure on Bronny. And I feel bad for Bronny, honestly, just because if he does decide to leave college now and go into the draft before he's ready, he'll basically be looked at as a nepotism hire, because a lot of teams who would not otherwise draft Bronny might be interested in drafting him just so they can try to get LeBron in free agency. If you take a team like the Sacramento Kings, who have absolutely nothing going for them, you might as well draft Bronny and hope that LeBron joins your team in free agency, because the second LeBron steps onto the court of the Sacramento Kings arena, he will automatically make them more relevant than they've been in the last 20 years. But also, I mean, you got to think about the pushback from people in the locker room who look at him like, does he really deserve to be here? He's only here because his dad is. He took the spot of somebody that is more deserving. So Bronny would just have the deck so stacked against him that I hope he doesn't rush it and takes his time in college. And if he's never NBA ready, then I mean he's LeBron James Jr. He He doesn't have to work if he doesn't want to. And everybody should pursue what makes them happy and what they want to do as a career. If he loves sports, he's got the money. He's at college right now. Get a degree in sports journalism. He's got a big Twitch following or social media presence. Get a degree in communications and business management and become a podcaster, Bronny. Do what you got to do to be happy. Don't just go to the league because your dad's been saying that's what you should do since you were 12. Because, sports, it's not supposed to be about family dynasties. That's what politics and law and all that other elite professions are about. Sports is about merit. And do you deserve to be there? And are you the best 12 people that this team could possibly field? If so, you'll be on the roster. If not, you're cut. That's what sports is all about. And it's very rare in sports. It certainly happens. If you look at Jerry Jones, his entire family is running his Cowboys organization. Not saying they're not deserving, but, there's definitely a lot of nepotism and buddy-buddy inside clubs when it comes to sports hires. But it's usually not the on-the-court talent that benefits from that. It's usually like Bill Belichick's son is one of his assistant coaches, like that level of stuff. And that, I'm sure people in those organizations will push back against. But I just wonder how, a young LeBron James would have felt if he was trying, and obviously LeBron's a first-round draft pick. Nobody's getting picked above LeBron, but just hypothetically, how would young LeBron have felt if his chance was jeopardized because Michael Jordan's son was in his draft class, and say LeBron really wanted to go to the Cavs, but the Cavs thought that they could get Michael Jordan to come out of retirement if they drafted his son first overall. That's the kind of stuff that I'm sure young LeBron would be very, very opposed to. And I just think that we're at a very interesting place in sports where when you look at how much money the athletes make, go back 30 years ago before the athletes were making $100 million in their career. The reason sports was more of a meritocracy than the entrenched professions is because the idea of being a professional athlete really didn't start until 100 years ago, and it really didn't become generational wealth until in the NBA until the 80s. In baseball, probably more like the 40s. Football, probably also around the 80s. So we're just going to use basketball as the example here. Magic Johnson didn't have a prestigious sports family. I can't think of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's dad was an NBA player, and that gave Kobe certainly some level of advantage when he was going up through the high school ranks. However, Kobe Bryant's dad did not make gob-stopping money to where he could afford to give Kobe private basketball tutoring lessons, personal trainers at the age of 10, and all the other luxuries that come with having a dad who's making $30 million a year like the athletes today make. So, long story short, because I don't want to dwell on this point, I think you're going to start to see more second, third generation athletes, and you're going to see the profession of being a professional athlete become more of a family thing than it used to have been, because the people that, one, if you're a professional athlete, you probably got some good genetics. These days, they make so much money that they can afford to give their kids all of the special perks that that come with having that level of wealth, in addition to the professional athlete genetics their kids already have. And it'll become more and more entrenched. And if you hear professional athletes talk, they always talk about their kids following in their sports footsteps like it's a foregone conclusion. There's a famous clip of Candace Parker talking to Shaq, and Shaq is asking Candace Parker why the WNBA doesn't lower the rims because it might make people more excited to watch WNBA basketball. And she responds by saying that she has a daughter who's currently I don't even think her daughter's 10, very small child. And she says that by the time my daughter makes the WNBA, she'll be drop step dunking. Athlete like Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, him and his daughter, he would talk about how when she grew up, Gianna was gonna, revolutionize the WNBA. And now she certainly loved basketball, but that's how they talk about their kids, that of course are going to be pro athletes. Why wouldn't they? And like I said earlier, that's how LeBron's always talked about Bronny. The only person that I've seen that has not done that, two people actually, is Shaq and Shannon Sharpe. Now, Shaq's son Sharif's currently in the G League, I think, on the Lakers. But Shaq said that when his son came up to him and said that he wanted to try to play professional basketball, Shaq said that if that's what he wanted to do, he's fine with it. But Shaq said if it were up to me, he would do something else. I told him, I said, we've already got a professional basketball player in the family. Why don't we get a doctor? Why don't we get a lawyer? Or why don't we get, diversify his portfolio, basically? And Shannon Sharpe said that when his son was little and got to the age where he wanted to play football, Shannon said that he sat his son down and said, look, if you want to play football, now keep in mind at this point, Shannon Sharpe was the greatest tight end in NFL history. He sat his son down and said, look, if you want to play, I'll support you 100%. However, I just want you to know the second that you walk out on that field and they see Sharpe 84 on your back, you're going to have a target on your back. And so those are the two athletes I can think of that just didn't immediately push their kids, at least that are open about it, into pursuing their parents' sport. And I don't know, it'll be something that if you're a big sports fan, keep an eye out on. Now, in other news, the NBA All-Star Game currently starts in an hour and a half, and they're finally back to the East and West format, which the All-Star Game is just pointless at this point. It's a glorified Globetrotters game because the players don't try. It's nothing but three-pointers and layups. You could say the same thing about any NBA game now. I mean, the final score to last year's All-Star Game was 170, 184 to 175. So it's just not fun to watch. There's no defense. And so we'll see what happens, but they clearly don't care, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into analyzing the game. Now, them going back to the East and West format is fine. It's more historical. They went back. Well, they started doing players as team captains as a way to drum up excitement. That failed, and so they're going back to what they'd always done. So no surprise there. Respect on Adam Silver for trying something different. Unfortunately, it did not do anything to generate interest in the game. Now, for me, growing up, I didn't watch it, but my favorite part of, at least I didn't watch it this weekend, my favorite part of All-Star Weekend has always been the three-point contest. And this year saw Damian Lillard win back-to-back by beating Trae Young on the last shot of the contest. So, seems like that was a really good three-point contest. And some of the talent they had for it was pretty good. They had Trae Young, Karl Anthony Towns, Donovan Mitchell, Dame, obviously, just to name a few. So it looks like they had a solid lineup for the three-point contest. Now, My beef with All-Star Weekend has always been lately the dunk contest. So this year, Mac McClung won the dunk contest. He beat Jaylen Brown, and Jamie Jaquez Jr. and Jacob Toppin were also in the dunk contest. Aside from Jaylen Brown, I could not have told you if you'd have just said those other three names, Mac McClung. He did win the dunk contest last year, so he must be a pretty good dunker. Jamie Jaquez and Jacob Toppin. I would have thought you were just listing off like generic names from a 2K roster or something. I've never heard of those people in my life. So, like the dunk contest just lacks no star power because the big stars are afraid of competing because you might end up like Jaylen Brown and getting second place to a bench player. One of those guys, I don't know if it's Jamie or Jacob, but one of those two guys is in the G League, and he's in the dunk contest over somebody like Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson's knees are fast, so it's probably best that he does stay out of the dunk contest. But like somebody or Anthony Edwards, like players like that are who people want to see in the dunk contest. So, I mean, it is what it is. At this point, I think they're just stuck with the dunk contest being a bunch of role players. I think that to be in an All-Star Weekend event, you should either have to be an All-Star or be in like the top 5% of a statistical category. Like for the three-point contest, either be an all-star or be some like Kyle Korver type player, JJ Redick type player who may not be an all-star, but clearly you're like a top 10 three-point shooter in the game, and it would make sense to have you in the three-point contest because that's what it should be. The whole fun of All-Star Weekend is you get to see the best three-point shooters compete against each other. Or you get to have the best, most athletic players like Jordan and Dominique back in the day, or Vince Carter and Kobe going up against each other in the dunk contest. And then the Pacers won the skills contest, which is a weird format they did this year. I don't think I like it either. Not to be so negative, I wasn't expecting that. But NBA All-Star Weekend is always just a mess. But the format they had is they had Team Pacers because the All-Star Weekend was in Indiana. Then they had Team All-Star, which they did take 3 players from the All-Star roster. Shocker, you have All-Stars compete in the All-Star Weekend events. And then they had Team Rising Stars. Or I don't know if they called it exactly that, but that's basically what it was. And they did some type of like 3-way skills competition. And the Pacers won, which once again, I mean, that's probably why the All-Star players won't compete in these events, because when you have Team All-Star lose to Team Pacers, it's not a good look. Especially when the Pacers are currently 6th in the Eastern Conference. So it's not like the Pacers' best 3 players are like insane or anything like that. Now, given that it is midway through the NBA season, it is worth looking over what the standings are right now. So far and away, the best team in the NBA are the Celtics, which makes sense. I mean, the Celtics have been one of those teams that have been on the verge of greatness for probably the last 8 years. Like, as soon as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were both on the same team, I've been expecting big things from the Celtics. And like there was that year, I think it was 2018, they almost put LeBron out in the Eastern Conference Finals. Then they broke through and they made the finals 2 years ago and they lost. Like, it's time for the Celtics to bust through that glass ceiling and get a ring. Their first ring since 2008. I'm here for it. So the Hawks are currently the 10th seed. So I don't expect them to make the playoffs. If they do, I'll root for them. But until then, I'm wearing my Celtics hat for the rest of the season. Now, it's the Celtics, the Cavaliers, the Bucks, the Knicks, the 76ers, the Pacers, the Heat, and the Magic. That's who's currently in playoff contention right now. Now, the Bucks being below the Cavaliers is certainly not what anybody envisioned when Damian Lillard got traded over there. The Bucks haven't been doing good since Doc Rivers got hired. They're currently on a 2-game losing streak, and I hope they can turn that around. I really like Doc Rivers as a coach. I mean, going back to that 2008 Celtics championship, I loved that team. That made me love Doc Rivers by extension. So I always want Doc to do good, but he just hasn't been able to recapture that magic. Now, hopefully, they can get everything sorted out, and this is just a minor chemistry bump. Hopefully, this week off can be good for all parties on the Bucks. And hey, maybe Dame Lillard winning the three-point contest can give him some extra confidence. The 76ers, they've been kind of dipping a bit too. They had been in the top of the standings there for a while. They've dropped down to 5th seed. Joel Embiid has been having an MVP caliber season, but I don't think he's going to be getting any MVP awards until he starts getting some playoff success. Now in the Western Conference, it's a pretty cutthroat race for the first seed. Right now it's the Timberwolves, but the distance between the Timberwolves and the 4th-seeded Nuggets are 3 games. And the Nuggets are currently on a 3-game losing streak, so that just shows you how tight that race is. But right now it's the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Suns, the Pelicans, the Mavericks, and the Kings. So apologies to Kings fans for calling you irrelevant. Clearly, you're the 8th seed, so I should defer to your playoff success. Maybe they can stay in. I've got a feeling, just because of how the NBA usually goes, that the Lakers will edge them out or the Warriors won. But the James Harden experiment seems to be doing okay for the 76ers, or the Clippers. I got my James Harden eras confused there for a second. He's been on so many different teams in the last 4 years, it's easy to get him mixed up. I mean, seriously, he's been on 4 teams in the last 4 years, so he's doing pretty good average-wise. But if they don't make the Western Conference Finals, the Clippers, then it'll be a massive disappointment to that franchise. I mean, the fact that they traded and made such a big deal about Paul George and Kawhi Leonard joining about 4 or 5, I guess 5 years now. Time flies. And then you add James Harden and Russell Westbrook on top of that. If you would have told the Clippers 5 years ago that they would have Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook on their roster, and that the best they would have to show out of that span was 3-1 lead being blown in the Western Conference Finals, they would have cried. So hopefully they can at least make the finals. Otherwise, if I'm the Clippers, it might be time to look into busting up that franchise as well and starting a rebuild. Now, on to a quick WWE update. The Rock came out on SmackDown and cut a heel promo for the first time since 2003. So, you currently have kids in college right now who weren't even born the last time The Rock was a heel. And it was interesting for sure. He had some good one-liners in there. He called the people of Utah trailer park trash. He said they broke the record for the most trailer park trash shoved into one arena. He called them a bunch of inbred hicks and just all the classic Rock lines. He came out wearing a $500 Gucci vest. He was just dripped out, talking smack. It was great for one night. However, there was really no substance to it. He just really came out there and was playing his greatest hits of what heel Rock does. Now, he did make an analogy about Cody Rhodes that made no sense. So, he came out and after he started talking trash, started talking about Cody Rhodes. And he said that Cody's story doesn't need to be finished because Cody went out last year and he lost. And when you lose, you're not entitled to a rematch. You don't get to complain and get a handout and get right back taken to where you were after a loss. You have to work and earn your way back to the top. Now that would make sense. He even made a comparison and said that would be like the 49ers who just lost the Super Bowl fussing at the NFL saying we need to finish our story because they lost the Super Bowl. The only problem is that Cody Rhodes won the Royal Rumble. So The Rock himself, being a former Royal Rumble winner, should know that that entitles him to name the champion he wants to face at WrestleMania. So that logic there didn't make sense because Cody Rhodes did earn his way back. So it wouldn't be the most logic devoid thing that has been happening in WWE recently, but worth pointing out. Now, in addition to that, a lot of people have been running around online after this segment from SmackDown saying that The Rock is going to pull a Mike Tyson and that he's going to sucker Roman Reigns into thinking that The Rock is on his side, only to turn on him at the last second and help Cody Rhodes win the championship. If he does that, I will be very, very disappointed because that's just not an interesting story. The Rock has the potential to be a heel for the next year, and it'll be better than what he's been doing as a babyface for the last 10 years. So I hope heel Rock stays. I don't have high hopes. That probably is what they're going to go for. The Rock turns a good guy again and helps Cody win, and that makes Roman mad at him. So The Rock wrestles Roman at WrestleMania next year. That's probably the simple story that they're going to tell because The Rock didn't come back 3 weeks ago and expect to be playing a heel right now. The plan wasn't for The Rock to not be. The plan was for Rock and Roman at WrestleMania this year. But the backlash to The Rock stealing Cody Rhodes' spot like that was so intense that they had to change plans. And they kind of booked themselves into a corner. So The Rock has to improvise, so he's a heel now for the time being. He doesn't want to be a heel. If you're somebody like The Rock who has an image, you want to be beloved. That's like his whole thing that he's been cultivating. It's like The Rock hasn't been a heel since he quit wrestling full time and became like a major Hollywood star. Because like everybody loves The Rock. Like, that's like his whole thing. Like, who doesn't love The Rock? Well, right now the WWE fans don't. And he would like to change that as soon as possible. And the second Cody Rhodes finishes his story, they can go back to loving The Rock. But if I'm booking this, which I'm not, unfortunately, I would have The Rock try to basically, Roman tries to cheat. The Rock stops him because he says you have to win the right way or something to that effect. And Cody ends up losing, and The Rock has the bloodline beat down Roman Reigns because he didn't win and he disgraced the family, and then they kick him out of the bloodline. Either do it that way, or you just have Roman try to win straight up and lose, and then you have him get kicked out of the bloodline. Or third option, more interesting, same scenario, except after the match, Roman tries to shake Cody Rhodes' hand and like give him the "I respect you" endorsement, and that's what gets him beat up because The Rock says it's a disgrace to the family to, you know, show respect to those who beat you. We don't respect the people that vanquish us. We come back and we beat them. So any of those three options to me would be a lot better of a long-term story to get invested in than just how we had you fooled the whole time, Roman. The Rock was never a bad guy, and now I'll see you at WrestleMania next year. That's just unexciting. But the other way, the way I propose, the way if you watch YouTube, Solid Monster, like a bunch of other people have put out there on Twitter, have proposed, it's a lot cooler. It gives you, like, what will Roman Reigns do? What will Roman do when he's on SmackDown because The Rock screwed him over, and all this stuff. Like, it's a lot more intriguing. And a lot of people are also saying there's going to be a tag team match between The Rock and Roman Reigns on one side on night one of WrestleMania, and Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes on night two. I have zero interest in seeing that match. I don't know why people keep talking about it when there's been zero reference of a tag team match on WWE TV. It seems to me more just fan speculation than anything, but figured I'd put it out there in case it does get announced. But a tag team match wouldn't make any sense. Seth Rollins supposed to be wrestling against the winner of the Elimination Chamber, who I'm predicting to be Drew McIntyre. They released the final lineup, and it's going to be Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton versus Kevin Owens versus Logan Paul versus LA Knight versus Ivar, I think. I know I'm right on at least 5 of those things. I don't know if Ivar made it or not. But, so that's the Elimination Chamber lineup. We'll see who wins. I'm predicting Drew McIntyre. I just think the run that he's been on here lately has been top tier, and I hope he can continue to do it on the big stage at WrestleMania in a marquee match. Now, we were going to do MLB reviews this week, but I want to save that for when Levi's here, just because that is his wheelhouse, and I want to talk about it with him. Love the Braves. I'm hoping the Braves can stay with their regular season success from last year and not flame out in the first round of the playoffs, but we'll see. That might be too much to ask for. Now, my final talking point this week is going to be they're airing a 10-part documentary series called The Dynasty that's about the Brady-Belichick Patriots. It's essentially the Brady version of The Last Dance, except they already did a Brady documentary 2 years ago that was supposed to be his version of The Last Dance called The Man in the Arena. So they're doing it again, and the biggest talking point from the trailer has been the remarks from Rob Gronkowski that he said he would pull up to the stadium and not want to get out of his car to go to work, which sounds like everybody when they get to work. And Wes Welker compared Tom Brady to an abused dog for continually going back to work for Bill Belichick. So the whole narrative this trailer is pushing is essentially the tyrant Bill Belichick making his players miserable. Now, I'm not going to say too much, just to wait and see what the documentary actually says, because a lot of times they'll have lines like that in the trailer, and then you actually watch the finished product, and it's not quite as explosive as it may seem. But this might mean that we've heard rumors for years that Bill Belichick was hard on his players and all this stuff, but when you use the term like Wes Welker did, that Tom Brady was an abused dog, like that makes it sound like Belichick was more than just your average hard-nosed football coach. So we'll have to wait and see for sure what comes out about that. But the Brady-Belichick relationship is immensely interesting. There's a great book about it called It's Better to Be Feared by Seth Wickersham. I read it 2 years ago. It's fantastic, easy read. If you're a football fan or just like drama, read that book. You'll learn more about Tom Brady than you ever wanted to. But it really goes into the dynamic between the two, in that essentially Bill Belichick always viewed Tom Brady as that sixth quarterback picked in the draft who was always just a game manager. And even when Tom Brady went on to win MVPs and win 6 Super Bowl rings, he just viewed him as another cog in the machine. And clearly, since Tom Brady's left, we've been able to see that he wasn't a cog in the machine. He was the machine. But Bill Belichick never thought that way. And Robert Kraft would always have to mediate between the two towards the end. And I mean, Tom Brady, it seemed the way it's always described from Tom Brady's view is that he viewed Bill Belichick as a father figure, and he always played to try to get Belichick's respect and approval. And no matter what he did, multiple MVPs, 6 rings, he finally just got to the point where no matter what I do, it'll never be enough for you to where you won't cuss me like a mule at practice. So I'm just going to go follow my own path. Especially when, after all that, Bill Belichick tried to get Tom Brady traded so they can start Jimmy Garoppolo. That, to me, I think was the straw that broke Tom Brady's back and kind of ruined his relationship with Bill Belichick. And it's unfortunate that for two people as great as they are, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, that they weren't able to put, at least Belichick seemingly wasn't able to put ego to the side and appreciate Tom Brady for the talent that he was. And it's crazy to think of somebody as great as Tom Brady feeling like they have to prove something to somebody. Like, you would think as many championships and MVPs as Tom Brady had, he can just like, look at my resume, you have to respect me. But the fact that he felt disrespected by Bill Belichick and constantly sought his reassurance just shows, one, how much of a pedestal Tom Brady placed on Belichick, and two, how reserved Belichick was in giving out praise. And not only that, there were a couple times where Belichick just completely threw Tom Brady under the bus. Like when Spygate happened and Bill Belichick was under investigation in 2007 for spying on the opposing team, Tom Brady was very quick to jump in and defend his coach, his team, what have you. In 2014, when the Deflategate happened, Bill Belichick said, "You'd have to ask Tom. I'm not in charge of footballs." When somebody asked him if he had any knowledge of deflating footballs before games. So that happened in 2014. Belichick tried to get Brady traded in 2016, 2017-ish. So those two things happening like in relatively quick succession are what drove Brady out of New England. But I'm interested to see how in-depth they go with this. But that being said, that's this week's episode, and we will see you next time.